All right, this is part two of lecture six, or whatever the cupcake one is. It's part two of that one. And I started kind of working on it a little bit to prepare to bring it to Substance Painter. What I've done so far is I twisted the frosting a bit. It was looking suspiciously like the poop emoji, which I don't know. I thought was kind of funny, but um, maybe adding a little twisting to it might have helped. So I detached it and added a smooth deform with the twist on the z-axis, which gave it like a nice little twist, and it looks a little better. I think if I was doing this for real, I might actually make a cool spiral sort of frosting using some maybe some curves or something, but kind of too lazy for that. And I began unwrapping it, and I thought maybe I should go ahead and start recording that part of it, even though we've kind of done unwrapping before. Um, but here's the unwrap. So the unwrap looks okay when you put the little preview image on it, but then if you actually look at the UVs, it's pretty rough. So we're gonna have to go through and kind of separate it out and fix that. Um, so the way I'm going to do that is to unwrap it in sections. So I'm gonna grab the bottom, use Control Plus on my keyboard, numpad to grab the bottom, and then I'm going to unwrap that section and move it. So there's the bottom. And I made a seam there already, and I'm going to keep that seam. So I'm going to add another one. And this one's just going to go down to the bottom there, right click, mark seam. Then I'm going to select this section. If you tap L, it'll select an element. You can also go down here and switch it to UVs, and it'll select the UV chunk, which is handy because now the bottom has been broken off, so it's a different chunk. So I'm just going to do the sides. So you can unwrap it, and you get this sort of, this kind of thing here. Oh, did I already have a seam in it? I already had a seam in it. Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah, so I kind of started working on this, and then I stopped and thought, I should probably record what I'm doing. So I'm sort of like halfway through. So let me just select that clear seam. Nope. Clear seam. And then let's do it again. Select these two chunks. There we go. And I'm going to turn this off and then do UV unwrap. So you get that kind of curve. So an extra tool you can use is you could go to unwrap and choose cylindrical projection, and it projects it as a cylinder. And if you choose align to object, you get this nice straightened kind of thing, which can be handy for shapes like this, where you get kind of messed up with the curvature. Actually, that's probably fine. I'm just going to go here and stretch it down so that it's a little more proportional, and leave it like that. I'm going to select these three sections and tap H to hide them. And then, so when you're working in Substance Painter, you have to make sure your objects are UV mapped. Substance Painter can do repeatable textures, tileable textures, if you set it up correctly, but there's a little bit more involved to really get that to work nicely. And since we are beginners, we're going to keep it into one UV space, meaning a non-repeatable UV space, which means we just keep it in that square. So I'm hitting Control Plus, which will grow my selection. I might do it one more time. Oh, I don't need the top selected. So I'm just going to X-ray mode and deselect that by holding Control. And let's see, unwrap that. Boop. Wait, did I already do? No, I did the top. Okay. So grab that, do UVs. So now I have that chunk selected, have my seam, and then let's do the cylindrical again. And just scale that on the Y so it's a little more proportional. Move it out to the side. And then do Alt H to bring everything back. So I unwrapped the cake part, the wrapper, and now I got to do the frosting. So the frosting was tricky because of the twisting. It gave me really, really bad, like weird UV results. So just to make things easier, I put a seam through the whole thing. And that breaks it up. So if I click seam, it'll select the part that's seamed out by tapping L. And I'm just going to do it in 2 chunks, which will probably be fine. And there we go. So if I click this UV sync button, I can see all my UVs at the same time. And I'm just going to move them around so they're not all on top of each other. So a little trick you can do right now, everything's sort of a different proportion, which you can tell by the size of the temporary texture. But what I want to actually do is go to UV, and if you do select these here, and I go to UV average island scale, it'll kind of average the scale out a little bit, so everything is sort of proportional, which is a good place to start. And then from here you can start packing it inside. Blender does have pack UV functions here, which you can do, and it will pack it up for you. It does like an okay job, but for something like this, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot of pieces to it, so I think it's pretty fair to just go ahead and do it myself, which I'm going to do. And you basically just move and rotate and scale until everything fits nicely in here. And you want to make sure it's inside of the UV space, so you might have to zoom in a little bit to make sure it is. Scale a tiny bit. Yeah. So it's okay to have a little bit of a border. These things don't have to be like 100% touching. Actually, it's better to have a little bit of a space between your UV islands because of anti-aliasing. This is probably going to need to be a lot smaller actually, because we have all these pieces that we need to move in. Oop. And this frosting piece is pretty big as far as like compared here. So I'm just going to kind of get it over there. Some of these I can make kind of small and just kind of stick them anywhere. So for example, this is the bottom of the cake, which is inside of the paper. Technically I could have deleted that part of the model, but I want to keep it because I want to experiment with maybe making the paper like slightly translucent. So I kept it in there. Let's select everything and scale it all down a little bit and see if that's enough to start getting things to fit. I might make the frosting smaller, even though, well, actually it is way bigger. It can actually be scaled down quite a bit, it looks like, and still be relatively the same. And let's just kind of move that in somewhere, maybe rotate it horizontally. So I'm just going to keep doing this until it's the way I like it, and then I'll pick back up when it's ready to export. All right, so I finished UV mapping the cupcake. It's already good to go. And I forgot about that cherry, so I went ahead and finished the cherry as well. UV mapped that really quick, stuck it on top. So we have a cupcake with a cherry and a little stem, and I think we're ready to export. So the first thing I want to do is I want to name this cupcake, and I don't need all these materials on it. So remember, we're going to do 1 UV space in the square and 1 material. We're not going to mess around with multiple materials just yet. So I'm just going to take all of these off and then name the last one cupcake. And I should have 1 material here and all the UVs fitting into that square. All right, so from here, let's go ahead and export it. So I like to make sure that my transforms are all zeroed out, scale 1, 0, 0. Make sure it's in the middle of your scene. I like to have the pivot at the bottom and in the middle. If these numbers are kind of, you have scales and rotations and things. Control A, apply all transformations. And let's go to File, Export, and let's do FBX. And I'm just going to do it right here in this folder. And for settings, I'm going to do Selected Objects and apply transformation. Go to Geometry, Smoothing, change it to Face. And I think that's all you need for Substance Painter. Cupcake.fbx is fine. And export. All right, so let's open up Substance Painter. Be moving on over. So this is what it looks like. I think this is a newer version. They do switch up their UI from time to time. So if you have it on your computer already, it might look a little different. File, new, and I'm going to do this 2048. Template, I'm just going to leave it blank. File, select. We're not going to really worry too much about exporting at this point. Cupcake. So we'll just keep it like this. This is all fine. One important thing though is make sure at the bottom where it says auto unwrap, make sure you turn that off. You do not want auto unwrap turned on because it will take the unwrap that you did and it will make it more, it'll automatically do it and it doesn't do a good job. So make sure that's turned off and click OK. And the model is here. So the navigation tools are a little bit different as they always are. So if you hold Alt and right mouse, that will pan in and out. If you middle mouse button and do this, it moves left and right, or pans, I'm sorry. Alt, middle mouse button pans. Alt, right mouse button zooms in and out, and Alt, left mouse button orbits. All right. So I'm gonna kind of go through real quick how to do some really quick and dirty texturing. So if you go to here, these are your layers. These are sort of like Photoshop. If you go to texture set settings, you have some settings here for your texture set, which we're not going to mess with this really quick, but that's all there. So for the layers, you obviously have different layers and you paint or add materials to those and you can overlay them and so on. In texture set settings, we have these basic kind of channels. These are the different kinds of textures that you have in your material. So you have base, color, metallic, roughness, normal, height. That's kind of the default. You can change this once you become more comfortable with Substance Painter. You can sort of change it and customize like the channels that you might want. And then we have all these maps here. These are different kind of maps. Map is another word for like a texture. Normal map, ID map, thickness map. This is like color data that helps you with certain functions of Substance Painter. So it figures out like where crevices are, where your object is in 3D space, things like that. So we want to go ahead and bake these so that we have them accessible. So we're going to go to Bake Mesh Maps. And this looks really complex, but we don't have to do too much to it. So sometimes if you have like two models, you would have this is kind of like considered a low poly, or maybe like, yeah, a low poly or I don't know, game ready mesh or whatever. This is the one you actually are using and importing and exporting around. You also can make a high poly. So high poly is a mesh that has like full detail. So maybe you sculpted every little detail into it, and then you can transfer those details to the low poly using normal maps, which is kind of a more advanced but common technique for 3D modeling. We're not doing that yet. So we're just going to use low poly as high poly mesh. So it's just going to use the low poly. We don't have an extra high poly. And then over here, this is probably fine. We don't need ID. Everything else is okay. And the default cage should be fine since we don't have an external mesh. And then just do bake selected textures. I'm going to bake all those textures. You can kind of watch it go through each of the different maps and bake it all out. Return to painting mode. So now you can see it actually looks a little different now. Because what happened was, so here's all my textures it's going to use. You don't really need to know what these do too much. except for they are used in some of the functions of Substance Painter. But ambient occlusion is a map that it generates, and that gives you those nice ambient shadows, like for example, between the cherry and the frosting, and between the frosting and cupcake, and underneath the paper. So that's kind of nice that it does that. So it kind of adds a little bit of lighting detail into your texture. So after that, you can go ahead and start texturing. Substance Painter does over here have a lot of kind of basic materials that you can use to define certain areas. I sort of like don't recommend doing this yet until you kind of understand how it works, and then you can start doing this. But just to kind of show you, like if I drag like I don't know, a concrete onto my model, it will maybe what's it doing? There it goes. It'll put the concrete material on my cupcake, so I have this like concrete cupcake. But starting out, we're going to make our own, and then we can start integrating the stuff into it. And you can actually use these in a creative way to make modify them to kind of make new materials. But so starting out, kind of the way I like to teach people Substance Painter is to practice using fill layers and masks. So what that means is we're going to make, first we're going to make a folder for each part of our cupcake. And we're just going to call this cake, and then paper, and frosting, and a fourth one called cherry. And so let's go ahead and just kind of go through. I'll kind of show you how to set it up. So these folders are kind of like Photoshop groups, and you'll have layers inside of these folders, and you can make a mask to mask out the rest of the model so that you can only have the attributes of the material applied to that part of the model. Okay, so first let's start with the top, the cherry. And I'm going to create this button here, which is a fill layer. So Substance Painter, you have a fill layer, which is just like either a color or an image. And then you have a paint layer, which is something you can paint on. So they're two different kinds of layers. So you cannot paint in a fill layer, just kind of like FYI. And I'll just call this color. I don't know why my caps lock is on. I keep hitting it by accident. And we'll come down here and we'll change the base color to kind of a dark red, sort of cherry looking color. When you make a fill layer, you have different attributes. So this affects the color, the metallic, the rough, the normal, and the height. So for example, if I go down here, here's the color, here's metallic. If I increase the metallic, you can see how it changes the material. And if I increase the roughness, it sort of gets rid of the reflectivity. If I bring the roughness way down, it gets super, super reflective, right? So for cherries are pretty, I kind of keep it more like that, maybe like that. And then these we'll worry about later. But now you see the problem is that it applies it to my entire model, which I do not want. So what I'm going to do is go up to cherry, and I'm going to right click on this group. I'm going to add a black mask. So black mask means anything, any part of the mask that is black will not show, anything that is white will show. So black out, if I use black, it kind of blacks it out. So nothing in this group will show through on the model. So kind of a quick way to do this. So if your food item is kind of made of different components like this is, then you can come over and go to this polygon fill, and you can fill in like polygons and chunks, right? So if I have polygon fill here, so I want to paint it white. So I'm going to put on 1. Anything that gets painted white in this mask, so I have the mask selected, it's going to show through. Obviously, this is going to take a while. So if you switch it to this is an element mode, so it'll paint the entire element, right? So for now, I'm just going to do the stem as well, and I'll change the stem later. But now you can see I have a mask that is just, everything is black except for the cherry part, right? And then you can just kind of go through and do it that way. So let's do just the cherry and frosting for now. So let's go to frosting, add a fill layer, And let's go to base color. Let's do a nice pink. Actually, maybe like a weird orange kind of frosting might look cool. Like a nice, like red orange color. I like red orange. It's kind of a cool color. And then we will use that for the basic color. And then let's call this color. And so you can't actually turn this off. So I don't have normal, high, or metallic. So I can just turn those off and just have these two values, which is kind of easy. This is a little shiny for frosting. Frosting does have a little shine because it has some, you know, it's made with like kind of grease. So I'll kind of take it down, but just keep a little bit there. And so now frosting, right click, make a black mask, select the mask, and then fill in just the frosting part with white. Am I doing it? Wait, why? Let me undo that. There we go. I think I accidentally clicked it and it sort of hiccuped for a second and messed up. So there we go. And that's kind of what you do. You just go through and do it that way for all the different parts. Same thing with the cake. Fill layer, color, base color, and I don't know what color cake is, but you can find, you know, sort of like a whatever. Oh, here's a trick you can do too. Let me pull up something here. Let's search for cupcake. Google image search for cupcake. And let me just grab a kind of a random image here. Let's see. All right, so I have an image of a cupcake. Something you can do is Substance Painter. That's kind of cool. I'm going to move this off to the other screen because it's going to be difficult to do it. But if you have another window open, you can actually select this and click on a color from another window. And it'll sample that color and kind of help you out with the, you know, color picking a little bit, which is nice. So yeah, that's a little trick you can do. And then for cake, we're going to add another black mask. And then we're going to go to Polygon Fill. Where are you? Polygon Fill. And do that. There we go. And this probably should not be, so definitely don't need metallic. We might need these other two, but we're going to bring the roughness pretty low, almost nothing. And kind of the trick too is you can see having the nice variation in shadow, even though this is more or less a kind of like solid color model, is actually starting to look pretty good. Now from here, there's a couple ways you can proceed. So you can continue kind of doing the fill thing that I've been doing. You can like kind of overlay them on top of each other. You can also add like a paint layer. So for example, if I go to like cake, I can add a paint layer that's on top of color, and I could call it like color 2 or color dark or something like that. And I could grab a brush. Here's all the different brushes you can use for painting. I don't even know what I should choose here. Maybe something that's like kind of organic looking. Dirt. Dirt might be pretty good. Yeah, okay. So here's my color settings and my layer. So I'm gonna take all this off. We'll make the roughness maybe a little bit more so there's variation. And then for color, I'm gonna pull that image up on the other monitor and then select a darker sample from there. And then now I can kind of paint some darker color on top. So in my sample image, it's kind of darker around where the paper is, as you can see. And you can kind of do that. And you can continue to go um, make new layers and then new things and new layers and new things and kind of keep going back and forth, which is pretty helpful. And so you can use, I highly recommend using a tablet with this. I'm not using a tablet because I have so much on my desk right now. I have like the mic and all kinds of other things, my coffee and stuff. So I don't have a good space for it. I do recommend using a tablet if you have one, but you can get away with a mouse if you absolutely have to. Um, but you can also kind of paint underneath the frosting. I don't know. And you could just kind of go through and do that. And I would add multiple layers and do different colors to overlay. So maybe like kind of a middle color sampling from the image. Maybe bring the roughness down a little bit. Paint that kind of like in between the two, right? And you can kind of just keep doing that, and that's kind of an interesting way to add color to it. So you can also add some, so if I could turn on height, and let's say I bring the height down, watch what happens when I paint. So it paints color and it brings the height down, which I made it a lot for kind of dramatic effect, but you can see it kind of cuts into the model and it gives you some of that kind of detail. That, bring the roughness up a little bit. That's a little too much. So this is like neutral. This is up, this is down. Bring it down a tiny bit. So now you get a little bit of like surface kind of bump in there that you can paint along with your color, which is handy. You can also make a kind of like divide or break up your different texture material qualities into different layers. So like here I was painting color and height and roughness all at the same time. You can just kind of turn everything off and maybe I do just height. So this layer is just this height and it doesn't do any color. And if you want to work that way, you can work that way as well, right? So there's different, ways you can kind of organize your layers. That's one way to do it. For this food project, I prefer you to make your own, kind of like what I'm doing here before jumping into these materials. So there's that. Let me look for, I'm going to do a Google image search over here. Let's do cupcake, orange frosting. I want to see kind of like how frosting looks when it's this color because mine is like 100% pure. Yeah, so I have an image over here. Let me open it up so I can sort of show you what I'm thinking. Let's do open image, a new tab. Okay. So here's my image. You can see it has a couple like indentions here, which we can do with the height. Also, if you look at the color, it's darker, much darker. It's like a darker, richer orange in the crevices and then lighter on the tips. So these edges here, I should have modeled this, but I don't know. I was just too lazy to, but let's see if we can do something like that with the frosting. At least attempt to do it. So my frosting does not have as many of the nice, like super intense detail. It's more globby, but we can still play with it a little bit. So let's go to frosting. Let's make a new fill layer in frosting. And let's get the color here. So I'm going to call this color light. I don't care if it looks weird. And I'm just going to take everything off except just color. And I'm going to start by getting the eyedropper and selecting my original color. And then I'm going to increase the value so it's lighter. Shift the hue toward yellow a little bit. And then I have kind of a lighter color here. So you can see now it's just 100%. So it kind of just completely covers up the rest of the frosting. What you can do though, is you can put a mask on individual layers as well. So I can go here, let's do a white mask so it shows through. If you come over here, they have these generators. These are really cool and these help out a lot with doing some interesting things. So let's try to use a generator just to show you what they do. So they basically generate masks based on the 3D qualities of your model. So you can see it'll mask out like cavities and edges and things like that. So let's see if we can mask out the edges so that we can get the edges to be a lighter color than the other parts. Um, Sometimes these are a little overkill, but I just wanted to show you these and see. If they don't work, I'll just do it manually. So I'm going to do edges strong, and I'm going to drop it on this mask. And let's see. So my mask has these attributes. I'm going to select the mask and play with these sliders to see if I can get something interesting. Blur. So I'm kind of getting it. The problem is I don't have a lot of like super sharp edge details on my model, so it's not looking great. Let me take these off and let me select the mask, right click. Let's add a generator. Let's do it manually. So let's select generator and choose curvature. Curvature is good at grabbing edges. And let's kind of do it this way. So let's invert it. Oh no, that was actually correct. And now I'm using just the curvature, which this actually looks a little better. Let's take the balance down. You can increase the contrast. You can do the blur it a little bit. Um, so you get this. So yeah, you can see it's a little lighter on the edges of the frosting. It doesn't look as good as the image because the image like had the super sharp edges. These are kind of globby, but same process. You can also paint masks manually if you want to. So you can select your mask, right click your mask, add a paint to the mask, and I can grab white and I can paint, undo, paintbrush, paint mask, and I can paint on my mask as well. So if you wanted to do it that way, you can do it that way. And that's it. So that's very basic stuff. So try to use these techniques to try to make something, make your food look interesting and appetizing. Um, let's do one more thing here. Let's go to the cherry before I sign off. Let me check the time. Yeah, video is getting a little long, so I'll kind of speed up a little bit. So something that I like to do as well is I have this cherry and it has a base color here and it has a roughness. And the roughness is pretty uniform. It's just kind of all or nothing. With organic things like the cherry or the surface of a fruit or something, you do have a little variation here, which adds a lot to making it look nice. So what you can do is you can go to roughness and instead of using a uniform color, you can add an image. And I'll show you here. There's all kinds of images you can use. There is something called spots that I use a lot, black and white spots. They also have this one. They have different ones. So I'm just going to use that and put that on there. So now if you look at the roughness, add some variation to it. So it's not like 100% smooth. And then from here, you can play with the settings a little bit. To get it a little bit the way you want it. Noise parameters. You can increase the scale so it's a little smaller. You can increase or decrease the overall roughness of it. But like adding some, I guess you could say like variation to the roughness as an image produces a nice result. So now from here, if you look, breaking up that highlight a little bit adds a little bit more organicness to the cherry, which makes the skin look a little waxy, which is a nice touch. You can also do a similar effect with like water drops or something. But yeah, so let's just kind of leave it here. Hopefully you have some tools that you can use to experiment with Substance Painter and make a cool material for your food. if you have a decent computer, then Substance Painter runs pretty smooth. If you don't, it might complain about your video card. You can kind of look up some issues there or use the computers we have on campus if that's the issue. One more thing you could do is it looks pretty good here. If you go to mode, you can go to rendering and you can get a nice render of your food item. And you can grab a screenshot from here for submission. And by default, it uses this like this like field environment. I guess somebody left a cupcake in the middle of this like field, um, but yeah, that's cool. And you can change the settings to not show the environment if you want it to just be like on its own. And there's different things you can do with it, so you can play with that. So that's it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of things you all come up with.